Office hours recordings eventually will be available. I'm sorry, everyone. My computer screen is messing up. Will be available on the HCD ESG web page under Technical Assistance and Training. If you don't see them posted yet, just know that HCD is working on getting them uploaded to the website. A copy of the slide deck and recording will be emailed to you by your grant administrator. Next slide, please. How to ask a question. All questions must be submitted in the chat box. Please type your organization and question into the chat box. The team will read questions out loud at the end of the presentation and will provide answers if possible throughout the presentation. All questions and answers entered into the chat box will be recorded as part of the public record. Next slide, please. Today's agenda. We will have ESG CV updates, office hour updates, ESG CV QA, and we'll also have a brown bag session, language, access plan, and duplication of benefits. Alongside our presenters, we also have several HCD staff, including ESG representatives, ESG CV grant administrators, and other consultants who are able to answer questions during the Q&A session. And now we'll hand it over to Connie for ESG updates.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good morning, everybody. All right, 2022 ESG NOFN applications. We are planning to release those and make them available to you by the end of May. And right now, we've scheduled our webinars. We always have a webinar for each NOFA within a week or two afterwards, and we have it tentatively scheduled for June 7th, but we'll give you more information as we get closer. So I just want to let you know the team is working on preparing those for this next allocation. 2021 ESG applications, we are moving along really well. We anticipate that those standard agreements for those that are getting awards will be executed either I don't know if it'll go into August. We might be even sooner, but definitely you should have your executed contracts sometime in July. For those with 2020 contracts, I'm going to keep the slide up through July 7th. Expenditure deadline is July 7th for your 2020 contracts. I know there's a lot of funding out there, a lot of other resources, but if you're struggling to spend your annual ESG 2020 contract, reach out to us, let us know, see if there's anything we can help you with. Remember that you can utilize some of those COVID waivers for this 2020 contract. After that, they go away for our annuals, but you can utilize those. And that brings me into my next slide. That if you are utilizing the COVID waivers, please indicate, we do have a form to indicate and know what waiver you're utilizing or that you're applying for to a particular expense. And we need to know the dollar amount because we are tracking those and we do have to relay that information to HUD. You've already have received some a spreadsheet and a waiver. We call it a COVID waiver template with all the different waivers you could apply to your annual contract. And then your rep has sent that to you. And so please stay in communication with your ESG rep. If you are using those waivers, note it on your detailed expense report, put a big COVID next to the expense, and then be sure you're sending us the dollar amounts. It could be even at the end of this 2020 contract. If you have any questions, you're not sure what that is all about, please reach out to your ESG rep. You can reach out to me, and you can always write to our ESG NOFA inbox also. And then the final slide is I always like to remind everybody and showcase our really great ESG team. They're working really hard. We've had a lot of changes. We are implementing a lot of monitoring this year, and everybody is trying really hard to make sure that they keep you, our grantees, and all our stakeholders up to date. You can always reach us at our ESG NOFA at hcd.ca.gov inbox. We're in and out of there several times throughout the day, and we'll respond to your questions. And I will turn it back over to you, Kim. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Connie. And now I just have a few ESG CV reminders and updates. Every ESG CV grantee subrecipient needs to submit an RFF by 4/20 for review for their grant administrator. Q6 report online form has been emailed to you by your grant administrator. The report is also due today by the close of business. Someone will drop the link in the chat for you all to have access. The new ESG CV notice was released yesterday on 4/19. Next week's office hours brown bag session on 4/27/22 will review the new notice in detail and answer any questions subrecipients may have. Next slide, please. HCD trainings and office hour updates. Someone will put the link in the chat for you all to have access to the upcoming HCD trainings. Upcoming office hour topics. These have been revised from last week's slides. On 4/27, the new ESG CV notice overview. And on May 4th, we'll have the COC and PHA coordination. And on May the 11th, we will have indirect costs. Next slide, please. And here are some links for your COVID response resources. Next slide, please. And here are some links for the ESG resource. As we stated earlier in the beginning of the presentation, these slides will be emailed to you and you will have access to all of these links. Next slide, please. Do we have any questions?
Kim, we have one in the chat from Veronica. Would you mind reading?
I have a question regarding eligible use of ESG CV Rapid Rehousing funds. One of our local providers has been receiving donations of furniture, bedding, and other types of household goods they provide to ESG CV Rapid Rehousing clients when they move into a new home. Can ESG CV Rapid Rehousing funds be used to pay for fees to rent a storage unit to store these donations? The items donated to date exceeds their available space.
And I believe the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. Sorry, Veronica.
I also see from Lock Lowry, is the RFF due today, a draft, and we are finalizing and uploading by the end of the month into eCivis?
I can answer that, Kim, too. So yes, that's fine, Rock. If you email your grant administrator a draft today, that way they will have time to review it and let you know of any changes. So then you can upload it by the end of the month. So yes, it's fine to email that draft today.
Making sure I have not skipped any questions.
I think you're good to keep going on, Kim.
All right, thank you, Erin. Next slide, please. And if you need to contact us, if you have any further questions, you can contact your annual ESG. Please reach out to your ESG representative or esg@hcd.ca.gov. And if you have any questions for ESG CV, please reach out to your grant administrator. And now I will turn it over to David, who will be doing the brown bag presentation of duplication of benefits and language access plan.
Thanks, Kim. Kimberly, before we turn it over to David, just kind of set the context for our brown bag session today. So as we talk about every week, this is an interactive space. We are going to very specifically talk about the language access plan and duplication of benefits. There are to be changes to duplication of benefits coming from HUD. So there will be some questions you may ask today that we may not answer. And there's a reason, because HUD's is making some edits and modifications here in the very near future. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our partner from MDG, David Munoz, to walk us through, I believe we're going through language access plan and then duplication of benefits. David?
Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. As Chris mentioned, today's brown bag presentation will go over the duplication of benefits and language access plan, and it's actually in that order. And so we can dive right into it. The next slide. So the first half will focus on duplication of benefits, also commonly referred to as DOB. We'll go over, what are the DOB requirements, when is it applicable, and when it is applicable, what are you responsible for doing in order to demonstrate compliance with that requirement. So a duplication of benefits occurs when a person, household, business, government, or other entity receives financial assistance from multiple sources for the same purpose, and the total assistance received for that purpose is more than the total need for assistance. So that's a mouthful, certainly. And one other way to think about this is to consider, so when I was in school and I needed a history book for class, young me realized that if I asked my mom for $20 for that history book, which costed $20, I'd get it. But if I then went to my dad and asked for $20 too, I'd now have $40. So I had an extra $20 to do whatever I wanted. And so in that situation, the multiple sources are, mother, father. For the same purpose, it's that one $20 book. And the, total need was really only $20, but I have an extra 20. And so you're essentially trying to figure out, is there, an excess of that? And so if we go to the next example, or next slide, this is really just kind of the regulatory boring part of it all, which is when does it apply? And it is always for any activity that is being funded with ESG CV grants, or if you are utilizing your ESG annual grant for the purpose of responding to COVID, then these DOB requirements would also apply. HCD has posted, and I think this is a sample of their duplication of benefits policies and procedures. And that actually has a template for all of you, whether you're a grantee or a subrecipient, that you can utilize as a starting point to develop your own duplication of benefits policies and procedures. And essentially what those policies and procedures outline is what you are going to do in order to ensure that both the activity is not resulting in a duplication of benefits and that the beneficiary is not receiving a duplication of benefits. One interesting thing about ESG that I think is distinct from, let's say, CDBG CV, is at the beneficiary level, because you're assisting persons who are homeless. The responsibility is really going to fall on you all as the subrecipients or the service providers, as well as the landlords or the property management companies that you all are paying, rental assistance to, rather than just solely on the beneficiary. And we can kind of talk about what would be required in those situations, something like a self-certification. But again, as Chris had mentioned, HUD is definitely issuing some guidance around this. And so we don't want to give you a direction and then they tell you to go a different direction come tomorrow. So as soon as we hear what the appropriate steps are, we'll be sure to follow up with everybody. Next slide. And so here is kind of the straight process that you would do, or that you would essentially outline in your policies and procedures, is how is it that you're assessing the need? How is it that you're verifying awards and use? How is it that you're calculating the unmet need? And then how is it that you're documenting this entire analysis? So if we go back to the example, if we assess the need, that book is $20. So the history book, $20, that's the need. To verify the awards, after I asked one parent for $20, the other parent should have asked, how much did they give you? If they found out $20, well, then they know that the unmet need is $0. So I would have gotten no additional $20. And so you would document all of that and say, you got paid $20 from parent one on this date, and the need was $20. We could switch it up and say, let's say it's still the $20 book. When we're verifying the awards and use, let's say parent one only gave me $10 and parent two then asked, well, how much did you already get? I say 10. Okay, I'll give you the other 10 so that we can cover the $20, but it's not going to be in excess of those $20. And again, you'd be able to document that. So that is essentially the process that you'd be going through with DOB. If we want to go away from the book, you'd basically be doing a monthly rent. Has anybody else paid that rent? How much of that rent have they paid? And if they have paid any, making sure that your assistance does not exceed that. And so I don't know, maybe we pause here for any questions on DOB before we move into LAP.
Yeah, thanks, David. We don't have any questions this time, but I will go ahead and give folks time to either enter those in the chat. You can come off mute, talk to David and I directly, or you can just raise your hand. I can unmute you if you'd prefer. Duplication of benefit. David, I really enjoyed the book example. It sounded like maybe a real life example that you used perhaps in your studies. It makes a lot of sense having the same thing paid for from two sources, the way you mentioned it. So I think that was very, very clear, and probably one of the clearest ways I've ever heard it explained. So anyone have any questions, or shall we move to the language access plans? Okay, we have a question in the chat, David, from Miriam. Would you like me to read it, or you're just going to respond?
Sure. So the question is, what forms of documentation would be appropriate to show we verified the awards and use? So it depends on what type of activity you're implementing. I'd say for, a shelter, emergency shelter activity, the fact that you're at one shelter means you cannot be physically at a different shelter. And so that there wouldn't be a duplication of benefits in terms of that. In terms of rental assistance, you will want to get certification from the landlord or property manager that you are paying directly, that they have not received any other sources of funds. that have paid for the same month of rent that you are providing assistance for. And so, for example, participants. Oh, there's a couple of docs in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'll just explain what's happening in the chat, David, since you were talking while this is all going down. Someone asked what those forms were. We have shared those forms in the chat, a duplication of benefits workbook, and a few other things, including our policies and some certifications. Those are available to you here. If you need them in another format, reach out to your grant administrator and we'll make sure we get them to you. But since you can get them all from here, you should be good to go. One more question. I'm going to go ahead and just ask it. Nope, I'm not going to ask it. This is not related to our section. So I'm going to leave that question from Ann Finn in the chat and have the grant administration team look at that. Okay. Question for you, David, not for me because I can't answer it, from Micah from Los Angeles. We've got 20 plus agencies to cross-reference. Are we allowed to use alternative methods? Are there other ways to accomplish the same thing?
Yes. So if we're, and just to clarify, Micah, is this like rental or the rapid rehousing activity, rental assistance? So with rental assistance, what is highly encouraged of its subrecipients is to put a lot of the DOB onus on the landlord or property manager. And so at the time that you all are, receiving the application or executing the agreement with that landlord or property manager, you want them to, inform you all of what other sources of funds they have received. And essentially you could put a penalty of perjury certification type of situation so that you know that you're getting all of the information. If we were talking CDBG, CV, you could even go as strict as entering into a subrogation agreement, but we don't really find that that's as necessary on the ESG CV side. So I think so long as you have something from the landlord and property manager and a self-certification from the beneficiary, you should be in pretty good shape.
Thanks, David. I'm not seeing any more questions and no one coming off mute. So why don't we go ahead and progress to language access plan, and we'll give space at the end to have more conversation about both language access plan and if other folks have data duplication of benefits questions as well.
Awesome. And so, yeah, moving on to language access plan, we'll kind of follow the same format. We'll discuss what the LEP requirements, which are limited English proficiency requirements, when do they apply, and then what you are responsible for doing in the event that they do apply, which is a shocker always. So we can go to the next slide. And so people with limited English proficiency, or LEP, are those whose proficiency in speaking, reading, writing, or understanding English is such that it would deny or limit the meaningful access to HUD-funded programs and activities if language assistance were not provided. And so the phrases that are underlined here are intentionally used to kind of draw your attention in the sense that the idea is to understand who in your community is currently not able to meaningfully access the programs or activities that are funded with ESG-CV funds, and then better understand what type of language assistance services you all need to provide to ensure that they do have access to those programs. And so on the next slide, it kind of discusses both the federal requirements as well as HCD's requirements that are passed down onto you all as the grantees or subrecipients. And so the graphic on the right is a screenshot of HCD's LEP plan template. This is also a template that can be used for others as a starting point. It even takes you down through where to pull the American Community Survey data or ACS data, and each step that you need to go through to complete the analysis, and the federal requirements, which are kind of finalized through HUD's final guidance, also hyperlinked here, are why that gets passed down from HUD to HCD to you all. And that is why you all are required to have an approach or a plan to ensure that these individuals in your community have access to these programs. Next slide. And so this final slide takes you through the process that you all as subrecipients would go through yourselves. The first four steps here, which is identify, assess, evaluate, and calculate, are also known as the four-factor analysis. And then as a result of that analysis, you're able to determine what language assistance services you need to provide in order to meet the LEP needs of your community, which becomes known as your language access plan, or LAP. And so there's a difference between LEP, LAP. HUD really loves acronyms, but they do mean something different, but they're also related. But just keep note of that. So with identify, it kind of explains the safe harbor threshold, which is whether or not your community contains a LEP population that exceeds either the 1,000 person threshold or the 5% threshold for the service area of your community. And you'll generally, or a tip for when you're going through this exercise is to start broad, and then narrow down if you need to. If you start broad and you're not hitting any or triggering any of these thresholds, then you don't need to kind of get into the granular details, or you don't want to waste your time getting into the granular details. So start big picture and then narrow down if necessary. Then you'll want to assess the frequency and extent to which your program engages with or provides services to LEP individuals. And so there is a difference between your HMIS and admin staff and the way that they're engaging with the clients that you all are providing services to versus folks in the street outreach activities or emergency shelter activities. And so you'll want to take note of those differences. Are you seeing them daily, weekly, quarterly, and how often are they LEP individuals? Then the third step or third factor would be to evaluate the impact to LEP persons' ability to meaningfully access the program benefits absent the provision of language assistance measures. And so the best exercise to do here is to put yourself in the position of the beneficiary and ask yourself from the moment, number one, how did they hear about my program? How do I ensure that they are able to know about my program? Second, when they kind of come to our facilities, what are we asking of anybody that comes to complete? Is it an application? Is there a waiver? Is there a release form? Or is there complaint and grievances forms? All of those things should be available in the languages that you have identified as prominent languages in your community. Then, and prominent meaning it is beyond the safe harbor threshold, which we kind of discussed and identify. Then the final part of the four-factor analysis is the staffing, kind of calculating what the staffing and financial resources that you all have available compared to the cost of translating all of those vital documents. So, we know that policies and procedures, program guidelines, every single application template tool form in the toolbox may get pricey when you're talking about translation services, in addition to oral interpretation services or somebody being there out in the field. So it is important for you to kind of define what those vital documents are, which goes back to kind of putting yourself in the shoes of the applicant and just what is the bare minimum they would need to be able to participate in your program, making sure those are available in those languages that you defined, so that you're able to kind of maximize the limited resources that you do have available. And then lastly, as a result of those 4 factors, you would be able to determine what those services that you need to provide are. So you could translate those documents, you could ensure that all public notices are published in multiple languages. You could also have somebody within your agency be responsible for coordinating all of the LAP efforts, as well as implementing your policies and procedures related to that. And that, I believe, handles the LAP section.
Thanks, David. So we have time. If folks want to ask questions about language access plan or even limited English proficiency, we're able to do that. Duplication of benefits, probably not much deeper than we've gone so far. As I said, there are things changing around with that. We'll save space, and if not, we can end a little bit early today. So thank you, David, for that. So any conversations, please unmute yourself, raise your hand if you want us to unmute you, or feel free to ask in the chat. I think I did see, oh, we can go back one slide. We sure can, Melanie. There we go. Did you have a question on this slide, Melanie, or you just wanted to see it again? So there is a question, David, here for you. Are language access plan services eligible costs for ESG and ESG CD? If you don't know the question, I might be able to answer, have someone else answer it.
Are they billing those under admin for ESG CV, Chris?
I don't know the answer to that question. Louise, we'll come back to you. Let me see if I can't come back and get an answer to that. I think the answer might be yes, but I'm not sure. Like David, I'm not sure where it might fall. And Melanie just wanted us to come back so she could take a screenshot of this. You can do that, Melanie, but please note that we will also be sending you the PowerPoint and the recording, so you don't have to do that, but I'm glad that you're interested enough to do so. So we'll go back to the last slide, please.
I think the key with those, sorry, after giving it some thought,
Sure.
The key with some of those language access plan services would be kind of creating that direct tie to the ESGCV program. So there's a difference between somebody that your agency hired to do, writ large translation services is doing public hearings that have nothing to do, or translating the public hearing notices that have nothing to do with the ESGCV program. Well, that is not directly attributable to the program, and so you wouldn't be able to bill it. But if you can prove that, hey, we had the ESGCV application, which asks the COVID tieback questions and all of that, and you can document that or show that tie, I think you have a higher chance of justifying that as an eligible expense.
Luis also followed up with, they haven't billed ESGCV. They have tried to hire some diverse staff, some folks that have diverse language, and they've not been able to. So they've been using a language line at $4 a minute, which obviously is that's not inexpensive.
Yeah.
All right, Louise, we'll follow up directly with you, but I think we've got the outline of an answer for you. Anyone else have any questions for LEAP or LAP or our duplication of benefits?
Chris, I think we did get a response from Heather about the Luis's example.
Okay, I did not see that. All right, excellent. So yes, Luis, no matter how you're doing it or whether you're describing it, so whether you're using the language line or not, that is an eligible cost. So we'll work with you to help make sure those eligible costs are in the right category. So whoever your grant administrator is will be hopefully listening to what I'm saying and help you along in that conversation. Thanks, Aaron. I did not see that. All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns around duplication benefits or language access plans for today? Okay. I'm not seeing any. Erin, do we have any other outstanding things we need to wrap up, or should we wrap up for the day?
No, I think we can wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this for today's office hours and our brown bag discussion. We'll be back at it next week. Hope you'll be with us. And certainly, if you need any assistance, you reach out. We will be here to assist. Thank you for joining us this morning.
I'm sorry, Chris, really quick.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, I came in kind of late, but I was informed about a quarterly report that's going to be due today.
Mhm.
Does that tie in with the Tule River housing?
That is a question I do not know the answer to. Erin, can you
I
read
do
that?
know the answer to that. Sherry, you do not have to worry about that at this time. This is
Oh.
for projects that had been operating within the last quarter, which was January through March. So you all will be submitting in the next quarter. For
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't sure.
Yep.
You're all good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Erin. All right. With that, we will go ahead and end today's session. Thank you for joining us, and we will hopefully see you next week. Be well.
Thank you all.